Call your life's purpose to achieve your win goals and change your life. Most people, they set goals. Very few actually call their purpose. That is the difference between trying and winning long term. Most people say they want to win contracts, but their actions say it's optional. And optional goals do not survive pressure. You see it all the time, at least I do. People start strong, they bid a little, they get quiet, and then they disappear when nothing hits fast. They download templates, watch videos, maybe submit one bid, maybe a few. But then life gets busy and the momentum dies. The real problem isn't lack of information here. It's that there's no internal reason strong enough to push through the rejection. When there's no clear purpose, every no feels personal. Every delay feels discouraging, and quitting feels justified. That's why most contractors stay stuck in things like research mode. Planning feels productive, but it doesn't risk failure. Without a calling, consistency feels forced, follow-up feels awkward, and bidding feels like gambling. And over time, it becomes easy to tell yourself, and easier, that this just isn't for you. Government contracting just isn't for you. Meanwhile, there are other contractors, no smarter, no more qualified, and they keep winning simply because they don't stop. The gap between trying and winning isn't talent or intelligence. It's whether you've decided that this is who you are. Calling your life's purpose. When I talk about calling your life's purpose, I want to be really clear about what I mean and what I don't. I'm not talking about hype. I'm not even talking about passion. And I'm not talking about waking up every day fired up and motivated. That stuff fades fast, especially in something like government contracting, where the timelines can be slow, feedback can be delayed, and wins don't come on demand. What I'm talking about is deciding who you are when nobody is watching and nothing is working yet. Most people never do that. They stay in the gray zone, where they kind of want something. They kind of want to win contracts. They kind of want a better life, but they never fully commit to it internally. And because of that, everything they do feels optional. Bidding is optional. Following up is optional. Sticking with it after rejection is optional. An optional always collapses under pressure. I've watched this happen personally for years with small businesses that I've worked with. People come in excited, they're optimistic, they're consuming content, and they're even asking good questions. But underneath it all, there is no anchor. There's no internal weight behind what they are doing. So the moment the process stops rewarding them quickly, they start pulling back. Not consciously, but quietly, and they miss a week or two. Then suddenly this thing they said they wanted becomes something they might come back to later. This is not a skill issue, and it's not a strategy issue. This is an identity issue, guys, gals. Calling your purpose is when you stop floating. It's when you decide, this is who I am. This is the lane I'm responsible for walking. And responsibility is the key word there, because when something becomes your responsibility, you don't wait to feel ready. You don't wait to feel confident. You do what needs to be done because that is the role that you have chosen and have accepted. This is why I say purpose isn't emotional. It's actually practical. In contracting, I can tell almost immediately who has made the internal decision and who hasn't. Not by how they talk, but how they behave when things slow down. The people who have called their purpose, they don't just disappear, they don't spiral, and they don't take rejection personally. They adjust, they refine, they keep moving. Not because they're tougher, but because quitting would mean walking away from something they've already claimed as theirs. When you haven't called your purpose, every setback feels like feedback about you. Every no feels like proof that you should not be here. And that's exhausting, to say the least. That's why people burn out so fast. They're constantly reevaluating whether this is worth it instead of simply just doing the work that's in front of them. Calling your purpose removes that internal, exhausting debate. And no, it doesn't have to sound impressive to do this. This isn't about finding a perfect sentence or about anything else. It's about telling the truth. Something simple, something grounded. Something that can carry you on the bad days. Because once you name it, once you really say it out loud, you then stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking for permission. You stop treating this like an experiment. This is where the shift begins to happen. Contracts stop being about validation. They stop being about proving you're smart enough or capable enough. They become instead a natural extension of how you show up. You bid because that's what someone in your position does. You follow up because that's part of your responsibility. You stay consistent because inconsistency would mean betraying something that you've already decided. That's the part most people miss. They think consistency comes from discipline. It doesn't. Discipline is fragile. It requires constant energy. Consistency comes from identity, from alignment, from knowing deep down that this is yours to carry, whether today goes well or not. And once that clicks, the whole process changes, not overnight, but steadily and quietly. You stop forcing yourself. You stop needing external motivation. You just show up differently, more grounded, more patient, more steady. And that steadiness compounds in ways most people never experience because they never stay long enough. And that's really sad. This is why I'm so intentional about this conversation. Because before tactics, before strategies, and before goals for 2026 or beyond, guys, there has to be an internal decision made. Otherwise, we're just stacking plans on top of our inevitable hesitations. Calling your purpose is what makes everything else make sense, the way that you know it should internally. My story, when I started in government contracting, I wanted out, and I mean that literally. I carried a napkin in my pocket every single day to work. At the end of each day, I'd pull it out and make a little tally mark. The goal was simple. Make it to the end of the year, then quit. That was my plan. I didn't understand my job. I didn't like my boss. I didn't like my coworkers, and they didn't like me. And I definitely didn't understand what government contracting even was. It just felt like something I'd fallen into, not something I had chosen. And honestly, at that point in my life, I didn't feel like I had many good choices in front of me. Things were moving painfully slow. I was learning pieces of information, but none of it connected. It was fragmented, not functional in GovCon. I couldn't see the full picture or how someone could actually operate inside of this world. Every day felt heavy, confusing, like I was putting in effort without traction. And at the same time, my life outside of work wasn't exactly inspiring much confidence either. I just come off a failed business, 3 failed jobs, $60,000 in student loan debt. I was 25 years old, living at my parents' house, driving down a broken down Pontiac Sunfire with the trunk smashed in so it couldn't open and the gas cap rusted off. The car had been in 2 accidents, but I needed the money so badly that I took the insurance payout and kept driving it on a salvage title. So when I look back now, I understand why I didn't quit. Not because I loved the work, not even because I had clarity, but because my identity wasn't one of what I would call being a failure. So quitting that job at that time would have felt like confirmation, like proof that I couldn't change my life, that I couldn't overcome what I was in the middle of and going through. But that just wasn't who I was willing to be. What's interesting is I didn't have a language for it back then, but I had already called my purpose without knowing it. I had decided quietly that I was going to be someone who figures things out, someone who stays, someone who doesn't disappear just because things were unclear or uncomfortable at the time. I see the opposite all the time now. I watch people come into government contracting strong, motivated, asking questions, taking notes, but then they slowly fade. They don't make a big announcement, they just stop showing up one day. And it's not because they're lazy or even because they're not capable. It's because they never made that internal decision I made without realizing it. For them, this was something to try. For me, this was something I had to make work. That difference matters. And then there was the moment that changed everything. I overheard my boss one day talking to a contracting officer on the phone. They were complaining about not being able to find any contractors that could provide road salts. And she had asked my boss if we could provide it. That single conversation snapped everything into place for me. Suddenly, all the fragmented knowledge connected. I could see the story. I could see the opportunity. I could see how someone could operate inside the GovCons system instead of being confused by it all. And that was the fork in the road. I could have finished my napkin tally. I could have quit at the end of the year like I had planned, or I could take a risk on myself and go for it. Step fully into something I didn't understand yet, but felt responsible for. I chose the second one. And along the way, I had to let go of a belief that a lot of people are still stuck in. The idea of if I do X, I should automatically get Y. Sometimes that's true mechanically, but at a deeper level, this becomes a spiritual game. When you take responsibility, when you take risks, when you meet life where it's at instead of waiting for guarantees, things happen that you can't explain. And I'll never forget one moment. A recruiter, one of the recruiters at my company, had set me up to fail on a contract that I had just won, and I was furious. I wanted to go straight to my boss and get her fired. I knew I could, and I was that angry. And in that moment, I felt God tell me to leave it alone, to remember who I was becoming, to choose differently. But I didn't want to hear that, and I was shaking. And ultimately, I was told that the choice is mine to make. I ended up taking a deep breath, and he said, fine. The second I felt that shift, that fine shift into my body, the decision that I was not going to go down that path and say anything, literally that second, I heard a scream from across the building that I worked in. It took me a moment to even register what was going on because I was so in that conversation in my head. And my boss ran over to me and told me that I had won another contract. It had been sitting in another coworker's inbox for weeks, unresponded to. It's crazy. Anyone could have found it, though, at any time over those weeks. But it was in that moment, right then, that very second, and that's when I knew that this wasn't random, this wasn't luck, this was alignment. Once again, I had called my purpose without knowing it. And it carried me through the moments where quitting would have been easier in the future, but walking away would have meant betraying who I knew I was becoming with, unrefutable evidence. That's the difference, and that's why this matters so much to me to share with you. So when I talk about win goals for 2026, I want to reset what winning actually means. Winning isn't just a dollar amount. Money does matter, but money is the means. What really matters is what that money represents in your life, autonomy, being your own boss, financial breathing room, legacy, time, spending more time with your friends and family and kids. Those things don't come from chasing numbers. They come from calling your life's purpose and letting your goals serve that calling instead. When you've called your life's purpose, money stops being the finish line, starts becoming the vehicle. And that changes how you show up. People I've seen win consistently in government contracting aren't confident because they've already won. They're confident because they're anchored. Their confidence isn't waiting to be validated by a contract award. It's rooted in knowing who they are and why they are here. They've called their life purpose. And now they're simply walking the road that purpose put in front of them, including all the ups, downs, delays, and all of it, because they know that they're on their way. That's why short-term thinking breaks so many people. They set goals based on those immediate results that they want instead of a long-term calling. They overestimate what can happen in a year and underestimate what happens over a decade or multiple decades when your goals are aligned with your life's purpose. Every missed milestone feels like a failure because the goal was never grounded in something deeper to begin with. But when you call your life's purpose, time stops working against you. You stop measuring yourself by speed, you start measuring yourself by alignment. The question shifts. Not did I win fast enough, but am I becoming who I said I would be? And that's a much steadier place to build from. What I want you to walk away with after this video isn't motivation. Guys, it's clarity. I want you to see your own life and your own purpose more clearly, to feel the difference between chasing wins and calling your purpose, to understand why you're drawn to government contracting, or to honestly admit if something else is pulling at you. So here's what I want you to do next. Have a real conversation with yourself. Ask yourself, why are you here? Ask what winning would actually change in your life. Ask what kind of person you're trying to become through doing this work. Then write it down, not your goals, but your calling. And quietly, intentionally acknowledge it, almost like a whisper. Invite your life's purpose to meet you in 2026. Listen to what it asks of you to do this year. And if that path runs through government contracting, even better. Because when your life's purpose becomes first, the contracts don't feel random. They become part of the journey. And that's how real change happens.